Hello, everyone. My name is Jennifer Piper, and I'm here with Zach Gulaboff Davis to talk with him about his life and his award-winning work for flute and piano entitled Crash. Crash won the 2020 Flute New Music Consortium's competition for flute and piano works. I'd just like to say that it's really nice to be able to talk to you today, Zach.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Jennifer. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, could you start off by speaking a bit about your background as a musician and a composer?
Sure. So I came to composition rather late, my third year of undergrad. So I've been composing about 7.5, probably going on 8 years at this point. I started actually as a pianist and percussionist and went to college to study piano, math, a little bit of education, just a bunch of things. I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do at that point. I ended up in a 20th century music theory class that taught us all these techniques, many of which you'll actually see in my piece, like this sort of very dissonant jarring chord at the beginning, all these really sort of cool things you could do that perhaps weren't presented to me in earlier music theory classes and stuff like that. And that just really spoke to me, writing these little compositions that explored different techniques, did things that I'd never done before, and sort of opened my eyes to the expressive possibilities of contemporary music. That it doesn't have to be some sort of esoteric thing in an ivory tower, and it also doesn't have to be only music of the past. So that was sort of my first jump into composition. After that, I've really just never stopped. I feel like every piece I write, I learned so much. So I've just been composing nonstop since then. And I've had the absolute privilege of working with some amazing performers and organizations like yours. And here I am.
That's so awesome. Yeah, thank you so much. So you began as a pianist, am I correct? Or
That's correct. Way back. I still play piano a little bit, but having come from a performance background, that definitely influences my compositional process a lot.
Oh, it's really interesting. So after listening to Crash, I found it to kind of have a clear ABA format, with the A section providing this kind of high energy collaborative experience. And the B section almost kind of, at least began kind of like a cadenza, and then kind of explored more of that flute sound, so to speak. Could you talk to us more about the construction of the work?
Absolutely. I'm a big fan of form, and I'm definitely a big fan of ABA, or some derivative thereof. It's definitely a sort of convincing way to present a short musical argument. And yeah, your read on the piece was perfect. So it opens a kind of dark, unrelenting groove that just sort of keeps building and building and building until, like you said, we reach this cadenza. I like throwing in cadenzas in chamber works. I love writing concerti. I've written 2 violin concertos, 2 piano concerti, and hopefully some other stuff in the future. So I love that sort of soloist versus orchestra dialogue and whatnot. And obviously a cadenza is an indispensable part of that. And just having this build of momentum, it's nice to be able to sort of just turn a knob and go somewhere else, as opposed to just having one sort of, through composed idea. So yes, we go to this cadenza. Like you said, it starts off in a very sort of cadenza flute-esque kind of way. There's, some sort of techniques that weren't brought in before. I think there's flutter tongue, just some exceedingly fast runs throughout the register. That goes on for a little while. And then we get to this sort of pensive dialogue between the piano and the flute, where the flute just sustains a few notes. The piano has a small cadenza of its own. And then guess what? We're back at the A or A prime section that, just brings the work to a frenetic close.
No,
so yeah, there we are.
It's so interesting that you mentioned that you like writing concerti, because I was going to ask, to me, it literally sounded like a piano reduction of a concerto. So that's so interesting that you mentioned that. So
I'm sure any pianist that plays it will attest to the fact that it's very sort of orchestral in nature. Although it's doable. It, you know, definitely taxes both players to their virtuosic limits, hopefully in a fun and exciting way for both them and, of course, the audience.
Well, that's really cool. Yeah, thanks for explaining that. So, what do you think has inspired you as a composer, or do you have specific inspirations in people, things?
Yeah. So almost every piece I write starts here at the piano and with this little device, which some people may recognize. Um, I love improvising, and so I love improvising, and then I love sort of taking those ideas and seeing if I can expand upon them. So actually, Crash, if I remember correctly, started with just a couple, like the first maybe bar and a half of the flute part. I just improvised it at the piano or some sort of, you know, variant of that, recorded it, thought, okay, well, this would be a good start for the piece. Probably set it aside for a couple weeks, and then went back to it and said, what can I do with this sort of, you know, kernel of inspiration? I felt that it was potentially a good idea to be expanded upon. As a composer, you don't have to start with sort of the perfect idea. It's your job to sort of, you know, spin that narrative into something, I don't know, you think is convincing. But yeah, I just started with something small like that and let it grow. That's one of my, that's one of the joys of composition, really, is just taking these little ideas and sitting down by the piano or sitting down at your desk and just over the, you know, subsequent months, just working them out.
Wow, that's a really quotable moment. So you kind of view it as building blocks in a way where you start with an idea, you can toy with it, and then move, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I also don't compose in a linear fashion. So if I have a general conception of how I want the piece to go, this was a perfect example where I want this, you know, sort of perpetual, gradual crescendo all the way until we get to the cadenza, and then that sort of, you know, return in a slightly different character. I'll sketch out sort of goalposts of where I want to go. So maybe I'll sketch out a bit of the cadenza. I'll sketch out a bit of the climax right before the cadenza, just to sort of give me motivation and a vision for where I want to go. Obviously, all that can change, but yeah, that's sort of in and out of my process.
That's really cool. Any specific composers that you think are inspiring to you as far as like people, or no, do you think I'm my own boss kind of thing?
That's a hard one. I always change my mind. The sort of generic answer I like to give, and this probably evolves over time, is I love the simplicity of Haydn, the way he's able to do so much with so little. I love the sort of melodic and harmonic language of, say, Chopin or Puccini, the way they're able to just spin these long melodies. Same with Rachmaninoff or someone like that. And of course, I love the rhythmic percussive drive of the 20th century Russian composers.
I love that you have such a good mix there.
Yeah, all those, they're the best. So I love that sort of, you know, amalgamation of styles, plus living composers as well, like Kevin Putz, Andrew Norman, Lowell Lieberman, flute composer, sure. Yeah.
These are all awesome names. Honestly, when I listened to the piece, it reminded me of our Iberic concerto just a little bit, like just the high energy beginning, that kind of like flowing middle section within the first, yeah.
That's a great point. I actually played timpani on that when I was like 14 or something at a youth orchestra.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Really cool. What do you find interesting or challenging about composing for flute specifically?
Composing for flute specifically. The flute can do so much, and flutists are so open to doing anything. It's sort of like the sky is the limit, and you almost have to narrow it down and decide what specifically you are going to do in your specific piece. You know, as a composer, it's really easy to say too much in one piece. Like you have a whole lifetime to compose. You don't need to say everything in one piece. So to really sort of focus, you know, all your ideas and also all the things a flutist brings to the table when you're writing for them, to be able to focus that into one piece and sort of write something that's coherent and succinct. I think that's extremely difficult.
Are there any particular characteristics you like to explore, like when using the flute, or any even challenges like, oh, I know they can't do that, or no, I want to really exploit that the flute can do this? in your compositions.
For sure. So it's, like I said, it's always a learning experience. So I'm sure every subsequent piece I write for Flute, I'll, explore new things. I love the sort of collaborative exchange of ideas and just working with, my individual performer or performers to explore their, nuances as a performer. One thing that really speaks to me about the flute is just its amazing expressive range. Obviously, orchestrally, you don't often get in that lower register quite as much, especially with younger composers and stuff. They don't think about that. But with, say, piano and flute or something like that, or chamber setting or something, just being able to explore that amazing dynamic range and all the characteristics and nuances each section of the range brings with it is super, super exciting.
Yeah, I noticed in Crash that you were really able to kind of exploit that flutists can play really raucous and low, like in the beginning, which I thought was really cool. Like we do have the capability for that in that kind of chamber setting.
Exactly.
Yeah, really neat. Yeah. So I noticed that your bio mentions your passion for designing dog agility courses.
Oh, yes.
You're certified in that, right? Like this is
I am.
passion and something that you pursue regularly. So how do you find this similar to composing?
They are both. So for anyone who doesn't know, dog agility, if you turn on the TV and you see something dog related, in terms of dogs doing, some kind of obstacle course or something, that probably is dog agility. They have all these different obstacles. They go up A-frames, through weave poles, over jumps, all this kind of stuff. And as a dog agility judge, I'm the person who gets to design those courses, then travel to wherever a event is being held and then officiate, judge those courses based on, a lot of preset parameters. It's super fun, a nice break from music, but like you alluded to, there's also just so many similarities. In terms of form and sort of continuity, both are exactly the same. So there are no two agility courses that are exactly the same. I'm tasked, every time I am called to judge another trial or something, I am tasked with sitting down and designing a new course, sort of based on some preset parameters, like the level of the dogs competing, et cetera, just like composing. So I'll want to, set out some things. I want maybe, an easy start, then some sort of difficult passages in the middle, and then maybe a nice fast finale. Just like, this piece sort of begins in a very kind of maybe almost static sense, then blossoms out and then comes into a, exciting close, something like that. So I view almost everything compositionally in terms of form, because if you don't have a, convincing form, regardless of what musical language you're writing in, it's hard to communicate that to the audience. And same with dog agility. If you don't have a course that sort of follows a logical and convincing form, people won't like it, dogs won't like it, it won't be fun. And lastly, as a composer, every piece you write, you feel like you're sort of putting yourself out there, because you write this piece, you have a sort of, idea of what it will sound like, because you have, Finale or Sibelius, some software to realize, how it's going to sound. But then once you actually give that to the performers, it can be a pretty exciting / traumatic / anything in between experience the first time it's getting performed. And that's super similar to dog agility, because you designed this course. Again, no one's ever seen it before. You go who knows where to, like, I don't know, you fly out to Oklahoma to have a dog agility trial. You put down the course, people start running it, and you're out there judging it, and it's kind of all on you. And I'm sure every judge, just like every composer, can attest to some experiences where it didn't quite go as planned, and they just sort of have to, live through the day and make the best of it. So those two worlds, it just sort of, brings a bit of everything to the table. And it's fun. I absolutely love both of them.
Oh, that's so awesome and really interesting to hear. And I imagine that when you create these agility courses, you want to kind of exploit what a particular dog can do, or maybe even, I imagine since it's a competition, like show what any dog can do in comparison to others. So it's really interesting that you kind of compare that to composition and talk about individual performers just kind of taking that piece and running with it, like making it their own.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Just one more question. Can you speak to us about any other pieces that you've written for Flute that we might explore more?
So this is actually the only like substantial piece I have for Flute right now. The caveat being, I would love to write more stuff in the very near future. So
yeah, we will definitely be on the lookout.
Yeah, hopefully I'll do a lot more in the near future, but super excited for this collaboration again.
Yeah, and like I said, I loved the piece. Like when I listened to it, I just thought the form, again, it's so funny that you communicated form so well, because I thought that's one of the things that audience members can really link onto. And I love it as a performer as well, because you can also have kind of specific characters for each part of the form, each section. It's really
See, that's the fun thing about handing a piece over to a performer. They think of all these things, like the way you described that. I never would have quite thought of it like that. I'm like, yeah, that's awesome. That's how, you know, you bring all that excitement to a piece that a composer absolutely loves. Thank you.
Yeah, so we'll definitely be on the lookout for more Flute pieces from you. So again, thank you so much for talking with me today. Do you have anything else that you'd like to add about the piece or the competition? Anything upcoming that we should be looking out for? Not in Flute, that's all right too.
Well, again, thank you so much for having me. I have a lot of sort of fun projects that are incubating at this, you know, kind of crazy time. I've taken a lot of time to compose. I have a new string quartet coming out with the Bergamot String Quartet based on the East Coast. They're just coming up to New York City, and that will be coming out in the fall with this sort of multimedia project exploring Hubble imagery of Messier objects, these deep space objects. So that'll be sort of a new frontier for me, doing a bit of multimedia things as well. So that'll be fun. And yes, stay tuned for more Flute music, because I am very excited to write more. Awesome. If you want to check out any of my work, go to Gulaboff Davis at zgulaboffdavis.com. It's all there.
Again,
hopefully more Flute stuff soon.
Yeah, thank you again.
Thank you so much for having me, and thanks to you all for doing this. It's really an honor to be working with you.